It's finally happening. The first shockwaves of the 2026 housing crash are here, and the numbers are brutal. Sellers are flooding the market, buyers are disappearing, and prices that looked untouchable just months ago are already starting to crack. But here's the part nobody saw coming. This didn't start with headlines or economists. It started quietly, in listing boards, in weekend showings, in neighborhoods where homes used to sell in hours. Now, those same homes are sitting, waiting, dropping, and the deeper you look, the worse it gets. Demand is falling faster than anyone predicted. Early warning cities are already slipping, and a hidden metric most people ignore just flipped into full danger mode. This isn't a blip. It's the first phase of a reset, and the choices you make right now could determine whether you come out ahead or pay the price later, because the real trouble begins with the next domino, and almost no one is prepared for it. The seller surge that signals the crash has already begun. The first real sign that the 2026 crash had started did not come from a headline. It came from the listing boards. Redfin's October 2025 numbers showed something the market had not seen in over a decade. Sellers outnumbering buyers by 37%. That imbalance is not a warning. It is the opening stage of a downturn. When the market tips that far, it means confidence has cracked behind the scenes long before the public realizes it. Homes that would have sold instantly 2 years earlier now sit untouched through entire weekends. Price reductions appear faster, showing traffic slows, and the shift is not subtle. It is the kind of turn that only happens when owners rush toward the exit. At the same moment, buyers step back. This is exactly how past corrections started. An overload of sellers, a thinning pool of buyers, a pressure buildup no one can hide once the numbers are released. The market does not crumble overnight. It softens in silence until the cracks become impossible to ignore. And right as this imbalance took hold, a second signal hit that proved the slowdown was not temporary. It was structural. Demand drops to levels not seen since the early 90s. The clearest confirmation that the crash was underway came when buyer demand fell to its lowest point since the early 1990s. Redfin's demand index revealed a collapse in activity that rewired the entire pace of the market. Listings that once drew 10 or more showings in 2 days now struggle to get one request in a week. This is the moment when the psychology of the market flips. Not because buyers are uninterested, but because the math no longer works. Rates climbed, payments doubled, confidence faded, and when people sense instability, they do not chase listings. They wait. That waiting is what turns a slowdown into a correction. When competition vanishes, prices lose the artificial lift they used to receive. From bidding wars, sellers who expected multiple offers instead sit through silence. That silence is the beginning of price discovery, and it always ends the same way, downward. This collapse in demand is not a pause. It is not seasonal. It is the kind of drop that rewrites valuations for the next several years. And once demand slips this far, the next domino always falls the same way. Individual cities begin to break before the national charts ever show the shift. If you want straight talk backed by real numbers, take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you never miss the next update. And if you see these shifts happening where you live, share your experience below. It helps everyone stay sharp. The first cities crack. Long before national price charts showed any weakness, certain metros began slipping under the surface. Denver was one of the clearest examples, posting broad value declines across most neighborhoods through late 2025. The drops were small at first, but widespread, the type of movement that always appears at the front edge of a correction. This is how downturns unfold. Cities with stretched affordability break first. They feel the pressure earlier because their price-to-income ratios are already out of balance. When demand pulls back, these areas cannot hide the imbalance. Values edge down. Sellers adjust expectations, and a pattern forms before the headlines ever catch up. These early cracks are the real pulse of a crash, not dramatic plunges, but consistent slippage across thousands of homes. Once one city breaks, nearby markets follow as buyers grow cautious and lenders tighten standards. The most dangerous part is how quiet it looks at first. Unless someone is watching listings week by week, the shift is easy to miss. But beneath the surface, the correction is already spreading, and right when these regional declines began stacking up, another misleading signal started convincing people the market was stronger than it truly was: the national median price, the median price mirage. For most of 2025, the national median price rose about 1% year over year. That single number misled millions into thinking the market was stable. It was not. It was already breaking. The median price does not measure home values. It measures the midpoint of whatever happened to sell that month. And when fewer affordable homes close, while more expensive homes still move, the median rises even as real values fall. This is why so many people sensed a downturn long before the headlines admitted it. They saw more price cuts, more homes sitting longer, more sellers adjusting. None of that shows up in the median chart. The truth is simple. The median climbs when the mix shifts upward, not when the market strengthens. And during a correction, the mix always shifts. Entry-level buyers disappear first, pushing the median higher, even as neighborhoods experience year-over-year declines. Seeing through this mirage is the difference between paying peak pricing and recognizing that the correction has already begun. Once you understand how misleading that number is, the entire 2026 picture comes into focus. Because the next phase of the crash does not come from charts. It comes from the mechanics underneath the market, the payment shock behind today's prices. One of the biggest forces driving this correction is the payment shock that arrived after mortgage rates climbed from around 3% in 2021 to roughly 6% in 2025. That single change doubled the monthly cost on many fixed loans. Buyers who once calculated a manageable payment suddenly faced numbers that pushed their budgets beyond any realistic limit. It was not just a rate increase, it was a complete reset of what people could afford. A home priced at $400,000 with a 3% mortgage feels entirely different at 6%. The payment jump forces many to abandon their search altogether, even when prices appear to soften. Budgets do not stretch the way the headlines pretend they do, and lenders are not approving the same range they once did. This is why buyers froze. The math told them to wait, and the waiting removed the momentum that kept prices inflated. Timing interest cycles now matters more than timing inventory. A small rate shift can cost or save thousands over the life of a loan, and that reality has reshaped the entire market. As payments pushed people out, another force began pulling values down from a different direction: foreclosures, rising faster than reported. While payment pressure squeezed potential buyers, rising delinquency rates added new strain from inside the market. Third quarter 2025 foreclosure filings, tracked in atom-style reports, climbed sharply in several regions. These filings do not just signal financial trouble for households. They introduce distressed properties into neighborhoods that had not seen them for years. Distressed sales drag down nearby values because they close at lower prices. Appraisers use those sales as comparable data points. And even one foreclosure can shift the valuation baseline for an entire block. When several appear in the same period, the impact multiplies quickly. The correction gains momentum without any headline announcing it. Foreclosure activity does not spread evenly. Some regions absorb the pressure quietly, while others feel it immediately. But once these distressed listings show up, sellers lose leverage, and buyers gain evidence that prices are not holding. It becomes harder for homeowners to insist on peak valuations when a lender-controlled sale 2 streets over closes well below expectations. These filings are not the main driver of the correction, but they speed it up by resetting pricing in places already under strain. And as distressed sales disrupt local comps, another type of pressure emerged from sellers themselves: the delisting wave. A surprising trend developed in late 2025 as more owners pulled their listings instead of cutting their asking price. According to data highlighted in Investopedia reporting, delistings surged across multiple markets. This created the appearance of tighter inventory, even though homes were not actually selling. They were simply disappearing from public view. Sellers retreated because the offers arriving did not match their expectations. After years of strong demand, many assumed their valuations would hold indefinitely. When the market pushed back, they chose to withdraw instead of adjust. This behavior makes the inventory picture look healthier than it is, because the missing listings distort the real level of supply. Delistings also create unreliable comps. When overpriced homes vanish, only the cleaner, better-priced sales remain in the data. That can mislead buyers into thinking values are stable, when the truth is more complicated. A property pulled today often returns months later at a lower price, but the original listing history rarely gets the attention it deserves. Understanding why these homes disappear offers leverage when negotiating. A property that vanishes usually reappears, and sellers who retreat once often return more flexible. And as delistings reshaped the data, another pressure point emerged in the broader economy: wages rising, buying power falling. Even though wages increased through 2025, they did not keep up with the rising cost of owning a home. Side-by-side comparisons of wage data, consumer price index readings, and mortgage cost calculations show a widening gap between income growth and actual buying power. On paper, households earned slightly more. In practice, that extra income did not offset higher loan payments, insurance increases, and elevated everyday expenses. This mismatch stretches the timeline for saving. A down payment that once took a few years now requires much longer. Meanwhile, ownership costs climb faster than the savings rate, creating a frustrating cycle where people feel like they are moving forward financially, but still cannot close the gap needed to buy. The pressure becomes clearer when running simple numbers. A modest wage increase might lift a household's income, yet a small rise in mortgage rates or insurance premiums can erase that gain instantly. The math finally explains why so many feel stuck despite earning more. This disconnect reshapes expectations. Households adjust their plans, delay moves, and reconsider long-term commitments. And as buying power weakens, the market becomes even more sensitive to shifts in rates, inventory, and economic sentiment, setting the stage for the next part of the correction. Rural markets hit with record price inflation. The pressure inside rural housing markets did not arrive overnight. It built slowly during the pandemic years, when people left expensive metros and searched for quieter towns with lower costs. That wave of migration pushed rural home prices up roughly 61% between 2019 and 2025. The median price in these areas jumped from $175,000 to $281,000. A shift few local households could realistically absorb. To longtime residents, the increases felt jarring. These were places where affordability once acted as a safety valve, allowing families to buy without stretching their budgets to the breaking point. As remote workers arrived with larger paychecks, competition increased, and rural incomes simply could not keep pace. The result is a new kind of squeeze. Locals who expected to remain rooted in their communities found themselves priced out of towns that had always been within reach. The change affects more than individual buyers. It reshapes the character of entire regions and alters who can afford to stay. This rural inflation marks a deeper shift in the housing landscape, and it signals that affordability cannot be assumed even in places known for low costs. That trend becomes even clearer when looking at who is getting outpaced next. First-time buyers losing ground fast. As the market tightened, entry-level buyers faced challenges that went far beyond rising prices. The share of first-time buyers settled around 32%, while roughly 29% of all purchases were made in cash. That imbalance changed the competitive dynamic in ways few beginners could overcome. Cash buyers do not wait for approvals, appraisals, or underwriting delays, and their speed reshaped how sellers evaluated offers. For someone trying to buy their first home, this creates a discouraging pattern. Even strong offers, backed by solid financing, struggle to compete with instant cash commitments. Investors and repeat buyers often move quickly, leaving little room for those entering the market for the first time. This pressure does not only affect high-demand cities, it extends into suburbs and smaller towns where cash offers were once uncommon. The challenge becomes timing. When cash buyers dominate, waiting for quieter periods can make a meaningful difference. Sellers who do not receive immediate offers often become more flexible. And that is when financed buyers can step in without being overshadowed. This shift highlights a broader structural problem. The gateway into home ownership is narrowing. And as first-time buyers lose ground, another layer of strain emerges from the cost of building new homes altogether. If you want ongoing clarity as this housing reset unfolds, make sure you subscribe before you leave. The next stages are already forming, and I'll break them down the moment the data moves. Stay informed and stay ahead. Construction costs. That trap. Prices at high levels. Behind the scenes, rising material and labor costs have quietly locked new home prices into a higher range. Lumber, electrical, components, concrete, and skilled labor have all climbed significantly over the last several years, according to industry cost indices. Builders operate on tight margins, and when their expenses rise, they cannot simply lower prices to meet demand. Doing so would push many projects underwater before construction even begins. This is why new construction rarely shows meaningful discounts, even when the broader market cools. Builders face fixed costs that cannot be negotiated, and lenders financing those projects expect valuations that justify the investment. When the math no longer works, developments pause instead of adjusting downward. That lack of flexibility prevents new homes from acting as a pressure release for affordability. The challenge becomes cyclical. Higher build costs restrict supply. Restricted supply keeps prices elevated, and elevated prices limit who can afford to buy. It is a loop that makes it difficult for the market to correct quickly, especially in growing regions where new housing was expected to fill the gap. As construction pressure holds prices up, another signal shows how existing homeowners are coping with these financial strains inside their own walls. Quiet financial strain inside existing homes. While builders confront rising costs, many existing homeowners are facing their own financial challenges. Home equity lines of credit have become more common, with households tapping their equity to cover expenses instead of improving their properties. At the same time, renovation spending has declined, leaving repairs unfinished and upgrades postponed. These patterns reveal a shift in priorities, driven by tighter budgets and higher borrowing costs. The strain shows up in small but telling ways. Roof replacements get delayed. Aging systems remain untouched. Cosmetic fixes that once refreshed a property are put on hold. Over time, these decisions create what some inspectors call problem houses. Homes that look fine in photos but carry hidden maintenance backlogs. For buyers, this adds a different kind of risk. A property under financial strain often comes with deferred work that may not be disclosed up front. Learning to recognize these signs, recent borrowing against equity, long listing histories, or sudden price adjustments helps avoid costly surprises after moving in. This quiet stress among existing homeowners is another indicator that the market's foundation is shifting. And as these pressures accumulate, they point to the broader correction that becomes clearer in the final section of the story. The 2026 reset window. The next year is shaping into what many analysts describe as a reset window, a period when rising inventory, weak demand, and slower price growth begin to align. Forecasts for 2026 show a continued cooling trend paired with a steady rise in available listings. When these two forces move together, pressure builds on sellers who waited for a rebound that never arrived. As supply increases, the leverage that disappeared during the boom years quietly shifts back. This transition does not happen in a single month. It unfolds gradually as more homes return to the market and fewer buyers feel rushed. The rhythm becomes slower and more deliberate. Properties that once sold in a weekend may sit long enough for multiple rounds of reductions, revealing how motivated the seller truly is. Each reduction becomes a signal of where pricing is heading. For anyone planning a purchase, timing becomes the real advantage. Entering too soon risks catching the market before it settles. Entering too late means competing once demand returns. In a cooling cycle, patience often creates opportunity. As this reset window forms, another factor begins shaping the road ahead. Policy changes that could alter the cost of ownership in ways the headlines rarely explain. Policy changes that could reshape costs. Beneath the market shifts, lawmakers are weighing policy changes that could affect monthly costs for years to come. Zoning reforms designed to expand housing supply, tax proposals meant to stabilize budgets, and new incentives aimed at boosting construction are all moving through various legislative channels. These efforts sound technical, but their impact reaches directly into household expenses. Some proposals focus on loosening zoning restrictions to allow more duplexes, triplexes, and accessory units. If enacted, these changes could increase density and gradually relieve pressure in high-cost areas. Other measures involve mortgage deductions, property tax adjustments, or credits for first-time buyers, each of which can alter how affordability is calculated. Pending bills often move slowly, but they influence expectations long before their final votes. Builders monitor incentives when planning future projects, and cities track zoning reforms to guide development. A shift in any of these policies can reshape affordability for better or worse. Understanding these changes helps anticipate where costs may rise or fall over time. Policy rarely acts quickly, but its effects accumulate. And as these proposals develop, another trend is quietly altering demand from within American households themselves. How American households are quietly changing. One of the less visible forces shaping the housing outlook is the shift in household structure. The number of multi-generational households has risen steadily over recent years, while delayed household formation has become increasingly common. Adult children remaining at home longer, aging parents moving in with family, and shared living among relatives reflect changing economic and social pressures. Household formation rate data and co-living statistics show that fewer new households are being created each year compared to historical norms. When fewer households households form, demand for separate residences grows more slowly, even in regions where populations continue to rise. This shift affects long-term pricing patterns because it influences how quickly new supply is absorbed. These changes also reshape what people look for in a home. Flex spaces, additional bedrooms, and adaptable layouts become more valuable in shared living arrangements. Builders and planners pay attention to these signals, adjusting designs accordingly. Recognizing this trend helps explain why some areas cool faster than others. Demand is no longer driven solely by individuals seeking independent space. It is influenced by families consolidating and delaying major housing decisions. And while these structural changes play out quietly, an even more revealing signal appears in how often homes actually sell: the overlooked crash signal. Turnover rates offer one of the clearest indicators of market health, yet they rarely appear in headline reports. In 2025, only 28 out of every 1,000 homes changed hands, marking the lowest turnover rate since the early 1990s. Data from multiple listing service tracking shows just how sharply movement has slowed. When homeowners stay put, the market freezes, leaving too few sales to reset prices. That stillness looks stable, but signals deeper pressure. Sellers wait to avoid losses, buyers wait for softer prices, and the standstill eventually breaks. When turnover finally rises, values reset. Low turnover means caution. Rising turnover marks the start of a healthier, clearer cycle. The first phase of this crash is already unfolding, and the next shift could hit sooner than anyone expects. If you're seeing these signs in your area, drop a comment below. Your local insight helps everyone stay ahead. And if you want every update as this reset accelerates, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The data is moving fast, and the next video could change your entire game plan.